Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today's another video where I'm going to go over some of my favorite authors and the books that I've read by them. This is not going to be a specific author. We're going to call this my favorite thriller authors part 1. I consider 5 authors in particular my auto-buy thriller authors, and I have read the backlist of 3 out of 5 of those in its entirety. I still have like 2 or 3 left with 2 other authors to read, so I'm going to wait and hold off until I've caught up with them to do a video with those 2. So we are going to be talking about 3 today that I have read their entire thriller backlist, and that is important to note for one of them, but I will get to that in a minute. So I'm going to start with probably the first one that really got me back into thrillers, and that is Ruth Ware. I do not remember the order in which I read her backlist. I've been reading them as they come out. I've been reading the new releases like since 0 Days and One Perfect Couple. I was caught up on her backlist, so I've been reading those in the order they've come out. But I don't remember the order that I read all of her old ones, and I don't physically own all of her books. So the first one, based on her website, is In a Dark, Dark Wood. I'm not going to give too much of a synopsis on all of these books just because they're thrillers. I don't want to go into too much detail, but this is about a girl who lost touch with one of her best friends and then is invited to, I believe, like her what do they call them? Not like a stag party, but the British version of a bachelorette party out in the woods at this cabin, and there's like all these other girls that are now part of her friend's life, and she thinks they're reconnecting, but like something is not right. So I do remember really enjoying this one. I love a good everybody goes into the woods, there's secrets, and not everybody comes out kind of book. I know that sounds really weird, but the atmosphere in novels like that are just usually perfect, and that was what this book gave. I do remember really enjoying this. Most of her books for me have been a 3-5 and up. I can't really remember rating any of her books below that. However, it is very hard for me to give a 5-star. I don't think I've given any book on here that I'm going to talk about a 5-star. Some have been like 4.5, 4 2.5s, but I'm just talking about the books and what they're about, and I'm telling you that these are my favorite authors. This really isn't me reviewing the books. So this was the first one. This may have been the first one I read by her, and that is The Woman in Cabin 10. And this follows a girl that goes on this luxury cruise that is like just starting its like maiden voyage, and it's like this giant yacht essentially that only houses like 10 or 12 people, or like cabins. I think 10, because I think 10 was the like highest cabin number. And Lo, our main character, stays in the cabin right across from cabin 10, and swears she meets this woman her first night there, but then like nobody's talking about her. She's not showing up at any of the events that are happening on the boat, and she keeps asking people about her and nobody knows who she's talking about. So she kind of thinks she's going crazy. And then obviously you've got like the locked room situation where you've got all these people on a boat, and she thinks she sees a body being thrown overboard one night, and that kind of sets off this mystery. So very exciting. News about this one is that the next book Ruth Ware has coming out is The Woman in Suite 11, and this is the same character. Lo is back for like a sequel to The Woman in Cabin 10. So I'm very excited for that because I really did enjoy this one. It may have been my first one that I read by her, and which sparked me to want to read more and more of her books. I did get that from the library, so I don't physically own it, but really remember enjoying that one, and I'm very excited that she is writing like a sequel to it. I like when authors write about the same character, but they're probably books you can read by themselves. Sarah Pierce did that with The Sanatorium and The Retreat, and I did like that you continue to learn these characters. And Ruth Ware's books are considered psychological thrillers, which means that you do understand like the characters' backstories and their lives, and you're more involved with them than just like a mystery where you don't really get to learn the characters that much. So having a sequel to that's gonna be really cool. Next we have The Lying Game. I, again, don't own this physically. I got it from the library when I read it, and it is about, from what I can remember, 4 girls that were friends like back in school. They go to this house in the middle of nowhere. It might have been, they go to meet in this house that's like in the area of where they went to school, and they haven't talked to each other in like forever. But one of them kind of calls the other ones. They're like, I need you to help me with something. So they all show up, and they're all at different stages of their lives right now. And they used to play this game when they were in school called The Lying Game. And just like a typical psychological thriller, they all have secrets. They all have things from their past that are haunting them, and everything kind of just starts to come out in this. And I remember this one being like very gripping, like fast-paced, action-packed, maybe compared to some of her other ones, which are more like story-based. Like this one I remember having like heart-pounding scenes. And I think, again, it was one of my first, it might have been my second book I read by her, because I obviously didn't start buying them until I really liked her as an author. So the ones I don't own are probably my favorites because they were the ones that had me continue reading her. But this one I do remember really, really enjoying because it was gripping. I remember like reading it in a day or two because I was with my sister for that weekend and we had gone to the library, and I think I read it the weekend that we went there. So highly recommend that one as well. That and The Woman in Cabin 10 are probably the two I would recommend most from like her older books. And then the next one listed like in chronological order from when she released them is The Death of Mrs. Westaway. And we're following this woman that gets this letter saying that she's inherited her grandmother's estate and like all this money because her grandmother was this like rich widow, and accepts like the invitation to this woman's funeral and everything, knowing that her own grandparents had died previously. Like, this is not her grandmother. So she kind of goes there and isn't completely honest with what is going on, and she's trying to figure out also like why she got that invitation to this. It has a little bit of like the Inheritance Games kind of feel to it. I think I even read these around the same time, where it's like nobody's sure why this woman in particular is getting the inheritance, and you're just kind of trying to figure that out. It's less puzzle games and more secrets and lies and everything coming out that way, but it was still like an enjoyable book. Not my favorite. It's probably the one I remember the least about, which just kind of tells you that it's not my favorite out of her releases, but still would recommend reading it if you like a psychological thriller. Again, I've not rated any of her books below 3-star. Next, she has The Turn of the Key, which was about a person that goes to be a nanny at this house kind of off the beaten path and everything, and she doesn't have like the best, she's not really a nanny, from what I can remember. And she ends up stepping into this house. It's like a smart house and has two little, I want to say it was two little girls, and one of the daughters ends up dead. And she has to kind of figure out like what is going on, what has happened. She's being accused of the murder, but she knows obviously she didn't do it. So she's trying to figure out all of the little secrets and everything that are going on. And one of the girls was like an absolute little brat. And it's just kind of, I remember like the one, I think the older daughter was like an absolute brat and put like a lot of questions and everything about the investigation and what happened into play. So you get time with her and the daughters like at the beginning, and you get to learn their personalities and like what's going on. And like, I remember the younger one was telling her like she was seeing things and hearing things and like kind of giving her these she was making her like second guess things that were going on the property. And it was a smart house, so there were like weird things that were happening with that too. She's being accused of the murder, so she has to kind of figure it out because somebody in that house killed this little girl, but they don't know who. They think it's her, and she knows it's not. So again, not my favorite. That one was a little bit different from her typical reads, I would say, but I still enjoyed it. It just was probably one of my least favorites of them. Then we have One by One, which took place like in the snowy mountains in this chalet, and it was this group of coworkers that came together for like a company retreat, and slowly, one by one, they start going missing. And it's just following the mystery of that, and you're following, I think, one character in particular, if I can remember correctly. I believe you get multiple points of view, but there's like one character in particular you're following as they try to unravel what's happening and figure out why people are going missing and who's behind it all. Very atmospheric, very much like a winter thriller, because it does take place like at a chalet at a ski resort, so there is that part of it as well. Really enjoyed this one. Again, one of the first ones I read by her. I don't own it, but this was another one that was kind of like that quick action-packed ending sequence where I remember the ending so vividly. Like, that's how well she wrote it and like how much it stuck with me. I can remember the exact like ending part of the book and what happened there. So really enjoyed that one as well. Very atmospheric for a winter thriller. If you like the like heart-pounding endings to thrillers with a little bit of a slower build-up, that one would probably be a good one for that. Then we have The It Girl, which follows a character in particular and her husband, who went to school together, boarding school, but together like back in the day, and they're still friends with one of the guys that they were friends with back then. But the whole premise of the book is that their one friend was killed, and this one guy was put away for her murder, but has been very adamant that he didn't do it. So she goes back to the school and like tries to bring up the investigation again and figure out what really happened, who was really telling the truth back then and all of that kind of stuff. And I did see, I don't remember if I could see the end of this one coming. I think I knew who the perpetrator was going to be, but at the same time, like, the ending was still shocking. Like, how she ended it was still, there was still some twists in there that I didn't completely get, and the way that it ended was, like, again, on the edge of my seat, waiting to figure out how it was going to be concluded. So basically, our main character goes back to the school to figure out if the guy that was put away and then eventually I think died in prison for the murder of her best friend was the one that really did it, or if other people were holding secrets and not being so truthful about what happened that night, as well as the girl that died, like, trying to figure out what she was lying about, because she was the popular girl on campus, so she had her secrets and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So this was a pretty good one. This is probably one of her more, like, popular novels, I'd say. I think when people think of her, they think of this book, because this is the one I typically see people talk about. And it was very enjoyable. Again, fast-paced. I can remember, if I can remember a thriller, that means that I liked it, because if I don't, I just kind of, like, data dump it out of my head. But I remember the entire, like, ending of this one, like, the whole storyline of it, so I would have to wait to read it again, unless I just wanted to read it for entertainment value, because I do remember the gist of it pretty clearly. Then I got 0 Days, and this one I think is actually signed. Yes. And this was probably one of my favorites by her, just because it was such a unique story. We follow this couple who, how do I describe what they do? They basically try to break into companies and hack their systems to show the company how robust their systems are. So they're paid by these big tech companies and these big, like, corporations to try to break into their company and hack their systems to see if they can. And basically one night, at the beginning of the book, one night her name was Jacintha, but she went by Jack. She's the one that actually would, like, infiltrate the company, and then, like, her husband Gabe would be in a earpiece telling her, like, what to do, where to go, what, you know, if he was watching the security cameras to tell her if anybody was coming after her and all of that. So one night she's on a job and all of a sudden, like, he stops communicating, and she just thinks that he lost communication with her. And then she ends up going home and finding him murdered in their house. So then it's, like, figuring out who, why, all of that. People are double crossing her. She basically has to go on the run because obviously she's the wife. They assume that she did it. And I think she took, like, on her way home from that job, she took like a detour or something that night, and it was, like, completely innocent detour, but because the police are like, well, you said that you left this job here and you didn't call the police till here, so what were you doing in that time? Because it only would take you, like, 20 minutes to get home, kind of thing. So she looks guilty. So she has to go on the run to not be arrested, essentially, while she tries to figure out what actually happened to him. And then finally, her newest release is One Perfect Couple. This is about a couple who goes to this tropical island to join a reality show with all these other couples. And as soon as they get to the island, like, things start going wrong. And this big storm hits when they were all kind of left by themselves because the crew had gone back to the mainland for the night. And from there, like, people start dying and people start turning on each other. And there's just, like, questions about who anyone can trust. And we're following our main female character, and her boyfriend was the one that really convinced her to go on this trip, and she doesn't know why and all of that. And obviously things are more connected than one would seem. This was a little bit of a disappointment, like a little bit of a letdown, because I don't think there was as much of a mystery as this was just a suspense novel, because we're figuring everything out as it was happening, and it wasn't, like, a big twist at the end. But still enjoyed it as a suspense novel, not necessarily, like, a mystery thriller. But I am really, again, like I said, looking forward to The Woman in Suits 11. It's coming out in the summer, July 8th. So it'll be a release that I'm very much looking forward to grabbing as soon as it's in stores. I might even pre-order it. There actually is a bookstore that I go to, like, in a small town by me, that is, like, they're expanding their genres, but they're a mystery bookstore, and that is actually where I got 0 Days, because they get some autographed editions, so I may just wait and buy it from them. Support small, and they usually have some nice copies when new releases come out. Okay, so the next author is the one that I was saying I had to specify that I've read their entire thriller backlist, because it is Lucy Foley. She started off writing, like, historical fiction, Her first 3 books, I believe, were considered historical fiction. So I have not read those. And now that I am getting more and more into that type of reading, I may go back and read them. But as a thriller author, that is what drove me to her, because she writes what I would call, like I said earlier, those closed room thrillers where you have a situation where everybody is trapped in like a house or just a situation that they can't get out of, and you're following multiple different characters and learning all of their stories one at a time and how they all intertwine, and the way that she mixes like how everybody is connected and how that ends up answering the question at the end of like the whodunit is just elite in my opinion. Some done better than others, I think, but I love that that's how she does it, because I know that's what's gonna happen, and that's okay. Like, going into her books, I know that that is going to be the gist of the book, that it's going to be that closed room, locked room mystery where you have this set number of people that are all involved some way, shape, or form, and she's going to introduce you to all of them and slowly tell the story from their perspective, and then at the end, like, wrap it all together. So if you go in expecting that, you're probably not going to be super disappointed, because that is how her books are all set. So saying that, I'm not going to talk too much about the plot of these books, because they all follow that kind of a same idea. They all are set, obviously, in different places and follow different people. So her first one was The Hunting Party, and we follow a New Year's reunion in the remote Scottish wilderness. So there's a beautiful person, there's the names of the people on the back. So the beautiful one, the golden couple, the volatile one, the new parents, the quiet one, the city boy, the outsider, and one of these friends is a murderer and one won't make it out alive. So basically somebody is killed and in this situation, and they have to figure out who did it, and they're all intertwined, and like they're all holding secrets that you just don't know about. Obviously they know each other because they're all friends and all of that, but just the way that she entwines her characters is just, I think, so skillfully done. But this one is also very atmospheric for the winter. It does have similar vibes to the One by One by Ruth Ware, but they're 2 completely different stories, but the atmosphere feels the same. Then the next book is actually the one thriller that I recommend more than any of them. And this was the first one I read by her. This is what made me read more and more of her novels, and that is The Guest List. And this is just so expertly done and woven. I gave this book to my mom. It took her forever to read it, and she was really upset when she realized like that it took her that long, because I told her I wanted to read it again, because while I remember the gist of what happened, it was so artfully done that I still think I would enjoy the twist. Reading it again and knowing what's going to happen, I think I'll notice things that I didn't notice before, but it has been about 2 or 3 years since I read this one. And this is a wedding that's on a remote island off of Ireland. And we have the bride, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, and the bridesmaid. And all have a secret, all have a motive, but only one is a murderer. And I'm not going to tell you who dies, but it is like a very integral part of the story. And oh, this one was just so good. Highly recommend this book. Out of all of these books that I'm showing you today, like, this is the one that I would recommend the absolute most. Then she released The Paris Apartment, and this is about a girl that goes to this apartment complex in Paris looking for her brother, because this is the last known place he was at, and she can't get him to answer her. And she doesn't know if he's like hiding there, missing, dead, whatever. So she goes there looking for him and meets all of the inhabitants of this apartment building. And we have the socialite, the nice guy, the alcoholic, the girl on the verge, and the concierge. Everyone's a neighbor, everyone's a suspect, and everyone knows something they're not telling. So probably my least favorite out of hers, just because like it wasn't that big of a twist. But again, the interwoven parts of the story, when how they connect back to each other, is definitely, I'm just going to keep repeating myself, where she excels. So still enjoyable, but definitely not my favorite out of them. And I feel like a lot of people have picked this one up first because it was a newer release, and don't give any of her other books a try because they didn't enjoy this one. So if that is you, at least pick up The Guest List, because even if you don't read any of her other books, like, definitely read that one, because it was just perfect. And her most recent release is The Midnight Feast, and this takes place at a resort it doesn't, but again, hers are all like in the UK area, Ireland, Scotland, all of that. And this takes place at a resort there that is just opening. And again, there's a murder. It happens the night of the opening, and it's in a small town too, and not everybody is thrilled about this retreat, because it's kind of bringing these like hoity-toity rich people to town, and that's not what this town is about. And this town is kind of like set back in time almost in that aspect, where they don't want this newfangled crap there, so everyone doesn't know if the town's responsible for it, or if all of these people that are at the resort, if there's someone there that actually committed this crime. So this was definitely a bigger situation, because you're looking at like an entire town rather than just like this small island where it was just a wedding, or this group of people in this house, or this apartment complex. So there was definitely a little bit more of a reach with the connections here, and then you had a bigger pool of people to be looking at. But this one was, again, very atmospheric, great for the fall. This was a really good, like, witchy vibe, fall, autumnal vibe book. And I really enjoyed it. I know not everybody did, but again, if you're not gonna like her, if you don't like the type of thriller she writes, you're not going to like her books. But I enjoy that type of a thriller. I know what to expect going into her books, and I have enjoyed them. So the last author we're gonna talk about today is Alice Feeney. And again, I don't own all of her books physically, but I have read every book except the one that just came out like 2 weeks ago. So I'll talk about the ones I have read, and then I'll show you the one that just came out that I've yet to read. The first one she has listed is I Know Who You Are. And this is about a woman who comes home from work one day to find her husband missing. And when she gets the cops involved, like, they think she's lying and she's hiding something about that. And she is hiding something, but it's not what they think it is. And this is a whole, like, is she who she really says she is? Because she's an actress. And there's this person that's contacting her that's, like, semi-threatening, like, I know who you are and it's not who you say you are. And I know where your husband is and I know what's happened to him. And it was just, again, a very twisty, interesting read. And I love when you, like, your narrator, you don't even know who you have. You have that almost, like, unreliable narrator. I love that, because you don't even know what to believe, because the person narrating the book to you know is lying, and you don't know what they're lying about. And that was basically the whole gist of this one. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Rock, Paper, Scissors was the first one I read by her, but we're not going to talk about that for a second. But the first book I bought from her physically was this one, and I had read a few of her other ones on Kindle or from a library before. The next one I'm not going to talk too much about, because I think going into it pretty blind is the best way to do that, because that's what I did, and that is Sometimes I Lie. And we're basically following this woman who is in a coma, and she's conscious but obviously cannot communicate, and she's hearing all these people come into her room, and you're trying to figure out A, what happened to her, and B, like, what is actually going on, who is she, who put her there, that kind of a situation. And the whole gist of it, like, the back of the book says, like, 3 things to know about me: I'm in a coma, my husband doesn't love me anymore, and sometimes I lie. So again, with the unreliable narrator, you don't know if she's twisting things in her head when she's explaining what people are saying, or if she really doesn't remember what happens to her, if, like, the people that are coming in, it was an interesting book to read, because again, you're dealing with a character that can't communicate with anyone but is well aware of what's going on around them, and you're trying to figure out the crime as she is trying to figure out the crime and what happened to her, but you're also not sure if what she's saying is true. So that was definitely an interesting read. I don't think I've ever read anything like that since then either, but probably one of my favorite ones by her. And then we have His and Hers, which is actually going to be a Netflix series pretty soon, or a TV, I don't know if it's going to be a movie or a series, but it's going to be on Netflix pretty soon. And this was probably my least favorite of her books, so I am shocked that this is the one that they chose to make a adaptation for. But it is about this woman and her husband who are both estranged. They're both kind of connected with, like, crime stuff. Like, she's a news reporter and he's a detective cop kind of person. And she goes back to the town that they're from and is trying to, like, report on this, but, like, he's the detective, so she does it, like, there's obviously a conflict of interest there, and investigating the incident, she's trying to report on it, and they're trying to, like, they're also, like, kind of reconnecting, and she's finding out that, like, he's been doing, like, nice things for her in the meantime. Like, they're trying to, like, rekindle their relationship, but at the same time not. And he eventually becomes a suspect in the murder investigation that he's investigating, and then she's kind of adamant to try to figure out what actually happened to clear his name. So I think it'll be an interesting TV show. I didn't love the book, but it could have just been that I just didn't connect with the way she wrote the characters. So if it's casted right, I may enjoy the show more. I will probably still watch it. I just didn't connect with the characters as much in this one. But it was an interesting premise that there's this separated couple, and they obviously still love each other. They still have feelings for each other, but you're trying to figure out, like, what has been going on. She doesn't live in that town anymore, but she comes back to it to investigate and report on everything. That's the gist of that one. It is really hard to talk about thrillers that I've read and give you an idea about them without spoiling them. So that is why I'm being kind of vague on the synopsises, if you've noticed. Then we have Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is the first book I read by her, and it was on Kindle Unlimited when I read it. I don't know that it still is, but also a very popular one. I'm actually surprised that this is not the one that was chosen to be made into a TV show, but I digress. This couple has been married for like 10 years, and they're kind of at a point where they're hitting-ish issues in their marriage, and they're both kind of questioning if they still want to be married to each other. And the husband actually has like face blindness, so he doesn't like know that it's his wife that he's looking at all the time. Like, he doesn't recognize people by their faces. They go on this like last ditch effort trip to this like location in Scotland, to this house, and they're trying to like rekindle their relationship, figure out what's going on, see if there's anything worth saving. And then all this weird stuff starts happening in this house, and they think someone's like after them, and they're trying to like work together to stay alive and everything. So the twist in this one was the best twist. One of the best twists I've ever read in a thriller. So highly, highly recommend that. If you're going to read any of her books, read Rock, Paper, Scissors. I also have read Daisy Darker, which follows this family at a house on Halloween to celebrate their Nana's like 80th birthday. I knew it was a milestone. I couldn't remember what birthday it was. And you're following Daisy, who's your like main character. You're following her throughout the night, and Nana dies. And the next hour, the next family member dies. So they're all trying to figure out what is going on to save themselves, and they can't get out of Nana's house because she lives on this like cliff thing where at night the water kind of covers the rock, so you can't leave until the tide goes back out. So they're stuck in this house until daylight, and are pretty sure that one of them is going to die every hour unless they figure out what is going on. The twist in this one I think is also very underrated. I don't think a lot of people have read this or have heard about it, but a lot of people talk about Rock, Paper, Scissors when they talk about Alice Feeney, but this book, I was shook at the end. And I don't know if it was just me, and maybe I wasn't expecting it because this was one I read when I was getting back into thrillers. Now it's hard for me to read thrillers because the past few I've read, I could pinpoint the perpetrator very quickly. But this one, I was shook when the twist happened because I did not see that coming. So this one's a very good one as well. Unexpected little, the ending is very unexpected, I think. So, but that's the premise of it. They're stuck at Nana's house, people keep dying, and they have to figure out which family member is a murderer. And we have Good Bad Girl, which is about this woman whose child was like stolen from a stroller like 20 years prior. So you're following her, you're following Edith, who was this like older woman in a care home, and then one of the caretakers there as well, and like Edith wants to break out of the care home, and her and this caretaker have this weird like relationship friendship where they're trying to like help each other, but the caretaker is lying about things too. So in true Alice Feeney fashion, you are following multiple different characters that are all lying. Everybody has their secrets, and you're trying to figure out who's telling the truth, if any of them are, and how it all ties together. This one had the potential to be like really, really, really good, and it wasn't bad. It just, again, wasn't one of my favorites from her. I expected a little bit more out of it. The premise was really cool, and like the storyline was very interesting, but it just kind of fell flat for me at the end. However, it didn't stop me from wanting to read more of her books. But this was the last one I've read by her because this was her most recent release until Beautiful Ugly just came out. And I have not got to read this one yet because it came out, was it on my birthday or the week after my birthday? It came out towards the beginning of January, and it's about a man who's on the phone with his wife when she is driving home, and all of a sudden like hears her have like a car accident essentially, and she gets out of the car to confront somebody, and he hears people talking and then nothing. And then when he goes to find her car, he finds the car and all her stuff, and it's just abandoned on the side of a cliff. So they think she's dead essentially, and he, after so long, tries to go to this island to kind of like get himself like out of this funk because he's an author and he needs to make money and write books and stuff, but he's been just in obviously not a good place since his wife went missing / possibly died. And when he gets to this island, he sees a woman that looks just like his wife. That's all I know. That's all I want to know. I've only seen one other person read this so far, and they didn't love it, but I am also a very harsh rater when it comes to thrillers as well. But if I enjoy it, I'm going to continue to read their books, and I don't think that this not measuring up to what I'm expecting will make me never pick up a Alice Feeney book again. And I think it has the potential to be a very interesting story, but we'll just see if I connect to the characters. I have found that like in a psychological thriller like what these women write, if you don't connect with the characters, you're not going to connect with the book as much, because the whole point is to understand the characters and feel for them so that like the story hits harder, I think. That's the difference between a psychological thriller and a just standard thriller to me. Those are 3 of my favorite thriller authors, psychological thrillers essentially. I will continue to buy every book that these women release unless something drastic changes. And then I will have 2 more authors to talk about once I finish their backlog. So I will do a favorite thriller authors part 2 at some time this year, because I do plan on reading the rest of their backlogs this year, and continue reading the books that these women release as well. I do not know if Lucy Foley has anything else coming out, but like I said, Alice Feeney just had Beautiful Ugly come out, and then Ruth Ware has The Woman in Suite 11 coming out in July. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if any of these authors are on your favorite authors list, if you've read any of the books by them. If you want to know more maybe about a specific book, I will try to give as much information as I can without spoiling it. But like I said, with thrillers, that's very hard to do. I can only kind of give you the background of the story. I hope that if you've never tried one of these authors, you give one of their books a try, because I thoroughly enjoy them if you like thrillers. If not, sorry. But thank you so much if you've made it this far for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.